What's up guys? Welcome to AnimeKouhai, an extension of Anime Senpai PH channel. All pieces of information are derived from the light novel. In today's video, we will continue Chapter 1, Volume 8 of the light novel, entitled Reconciliation and Agreement. This video is the 10th part of Chapter 1 in our Tensura spoiler video series. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, feel free to check out the links in the description below. Now, let's get to the video. It was just a passing thought, but it kind of surprised Rimuru how well these puzzle pieces fit together. It was scary stuff, and Rimuru was shocked at the sheer well of knowledge flowing out from him. Raphael sounded like it wanted to say something, but Rimuru was sure he was just imagining things. Maybe it was just envious of his genius, or maybe it thought Rimuru had stolen its thunder, because he didn't ask any questions of it. An exasperated Hinata asked Louie if the 7 days had thought Hinata was a thorn in their side. Because of that, Louie replied that it sounded like it. They had probably intended to help Clayman ascend, then have Hinata get killed fighting Clayman. They could never have defeated Hinata after all, so Louie didn't think they had much other choice. It wasn't a totally far-out concept. Step 1, have Clayman defeat Hinata. Step 2, either kill off Clayman somehow or operate him like a puppet. Rimuru couldn't say what they wanted to do with him, but Clayman's faith in them was genuine. If they could get Hinata out of the picture, Clayman would do anything the 7 days wanted. Meanwhile, they would have Farmus wipe the monster nation out and firm up the foundations Luminism worked with, naturally making sure everyone got to share in the resulting profits. A nation as big as Farmus mobilizing would mean big money for Eastern armor and weapon dealers. Plus, more than anything else, the 7 days would be back on Luminous's good side. Rimuru didn't want to jump to conclusions too early, but the possibility of all this seemed worthy of consideration to him. Hinata, interested in Louie's theory, asked if Rimuru thought they pitted Hinata against him in hopes that she would be defeated, because between that and protecting the tenets of Luminism, she supposed it would be 2 birds with 1 stone. This gave Rimuru another idea, but he asked back if they were really sure that the 7 days were behind that. Renard, seated next to Hinata, replied that there's no doubting it, because it was the clergy who introduced them to those merchants in the first place. That certainly cast more suspicion on them. Having such a heroic band make the introduction, nobody would ever doubt their intentions, which would make it easier for the clergy to reach their goals. Rimuru wasn't sure they'd thought it out all the way like that when he fought Hinata for the first time. But the second, they definitely wanted Rimuru to kill her. Rimuru silently cursed them, calling them conniving bastards, because it scared him a bit. But they were all gone anyway, so it was a water under the bridge. But Rimuru remembered that there were 7 people in the clergy, and they had only eradicated 6 of them. So he asked if one of them was still left. Hinata seemed pretty at ease as far as the clergy were concerned, but thinking about it, this wasn't over yet at all. Whoever the final survivor was had to be up to their ears in this. It unnerved Rimuru, but Hinata just flashed him a cold smile and said there was nothing to worry about there, since Nikolaus had contacted her from his sanctum to say that the final one had also been eradicated. It happened after they discovered that the crystal ball Rimuru sent had been tampered with, and that was enough evidence to execute him. The thin smile that accompanied Hinata's words would be enough to make anyone feel threatened. The sight of this beautiful woman talking about such sinister conspiracies was probably one reason it was easy to get the wrong idea about her. Rimuru asked who was this last guy. He hated to think it was Gran, the Sunday priest, fabled to be stronger than even Clayman, because if so, it meant he would need to keep a careful eye out for this Nikolaus guy too. Hinata replied that she was told it was Gran, the Sunday priest and chief of the clergy. Gran almost never took the initiative on anything by himself, so it made sense he was the last one left. Luminous's ears perked up when she realized that Granville was defeated and told Hinata that Nikolaus, that Cardinal, was infatuated with Hinata. Luminous wanted to know how Nikolaus did it. Louie explained that it wasn't the most heroic approach, but Nikolaus had a disintegration spell set up in advance, and it was enough of a surprise move to do him in. Luminous concluded that Granville must have aged terribly if he fell for a trap like that. She sounded sad about it, but Rimuru's mind was on other matters. Unfortunately, it seemed that he would need to add a new entry to his mental list of people to watch out for. It might have been a surprise move, but Rimuru couldn't let his guard down. Disintegration was lethal against most people. He advised himself not to forget Cardinal Nikolaus' name. Hinata asked Luminous if by Granville she meant Gran. Hinata had a thoughtful expression. The name Granville must have rung a bell. Luminous replied that she did. She explained that his real name was Granville. He had been known as the Hero of Light in his glory days, and Granville had even fought Luminous once. For a god, Luminous acted so oddly innocent at times. Rimuru might have been imagining it, but sometimes it felt like Luminous was trying to act all high and mighty and not quite succeeding all the time. Rimuru wondered if one could consider all this an act. Then Rimuru felt it, her eyes dead upon him. But he was just imagining things. He said to himself, so much for that suspicion. Hinata seemed to have an idea in mind, but she must not have been fully sure about it, because she tried to say something, but she went no further. Hinata instead recalled that Granville had been pretty strong in the past, and up to her level, in fact. Luminous answered that Hinata could say that. She added that anyone who calls themselves a hero usually finds themselves bound by fate soon enough, and perhaps Granville resented her somewhere deep in his heart. Perhaps indeed, just like Milim told Rimuru, heroes and demon lords often intertwined. Granville was defeated by the demon lord Luminous, opting to swear his allegiance to her instead. Deep down though, Granville might have had mixed feelings about her, feelings he couldn't escape from, even after becoming a living legend who brought many champions in their own right into the world. But at this point, it was all just guesswork. Rimuru said that's a relief, at least, and it meant that everyone who had picked a fight with them, Clayman, Farmers, the 7 Days Clergy, they'd all met their end. Benimaru and Rimuru's other officials nodded their agreement. All's well that ends well, Rigurd eagerly commented with a smile. You said it, Rimuru replied, returning the smile, as he felt the tension escape the hall. Rimuru said that they'd had to deal with a lot of dangerous foes, but at this point, most of the problems were safely behind them. But he sure didn't want anyone controlling him behind the scenes. If they hadn't noticed these merchants scheming in the shadows, Rimuru honestly would have started to suspect Yuki. Yuki was pretty suspicious. When it came to humans in Inglacia with deep ties to Hinata, Yuki was the prime candidate. Rimuru felt bad about it, but he couldn't take him off the list. Renard asked if Rimuru was referring to Yuki Kagurazaka, the guild master. Rimuru nodded in confirmation. Thinking about it impartially, it made sense. He was the prime suspect at the time, but Yuki had no reason to have Hinata and Rimuru fight each other. If there was no motive, it was pretty hard to picture Yuki as the culprit. On the other hand, maybe someone was deftly scheming to frame Yuki. The Eastern merchants could pull that off well enough, Rimuru thought. They'd proven more than capable of carrying out multiple operations remotely at the same time. If the clergy were the main bad guys, the merchants would have a motive to take the heat of them a little, and it made sense. But Hinata said that Yuki being a suspect wasn't out of the question. Right when Rimuru had convinced himself, Hinata threw him with that observation. Rimuru told Hinata that it seemed like she was doubting someone from her own homeland. Hinata replied that she was only considering every possibility, and for that matter, it might be a bit early to assume the real mastermind was gone. She explained that the moderate jester that had killed Roy was still on the loose, and those Eastern merchants still had deep roots all over the Western nations. It felt like Hinata was splashing cold water on Rimuru. She was right. It was too early to breathe easy. Rimuru braced himself anew. He was convinced and said that it's not over yet, and they couldn't afford to be too optimistic. Hinata said that they had better inform everyone about this. Benimaru nodded, while the paladins facing him looked similarly convinced. Rimuru continued that as Hinata had said, it's very likely that the person or persons behind all this was still around. Rimuru knew he had said that the clergy might be the main bad guys, but that was just a passing idea more than anything. It's no good to throw blame around without any conclusive evidence. Rimuru proposed to keep a close eye on this as they went forward. Everyone murmured their agreement at this conclusion. It was a bad idea to cast judgment without merit. Rimuru was fairly confident in his opposition, but Raphael didn't offer its agreement. It didn't disagree either though, so Rimuru thinks the possibility was there. He just didn't have the evidence to be sure. For now, Rimuru would have to trust in Raphael, and with the paladins happy with this conclusion, he thought it best to leave it at that. That wrapped up the recap of past events. They knew they had to investigate the possibility of another mastermind out there, but that could wait for later. Today, they were here to figure out how they needed to work together to bury the hatchet for good. It was at this moment that Shuna brought in coffee and snacks for them. It seemed that scones and french fries were on today's menu. Rimuru had to hand it to Shuna. She demonstrated impeccable timing. Rimuru immediately tackled his plate as the paladin sat there, figuring out what to do. That's it for this video, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you will never miss the upcoming continuation of Tensura spoiler video series. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shout out to the top 10 commenters on my previous video. Shout out to DISCLAIMER 420, Jamie Ira, Mazin Zold, Swarup Sagar, Michael, Marshall Gaming 21, Abhignan 27 Girish, Patrick 0216, Abhishek Dungdung, TY243, Eric Fimate, Wilfred Miller, Sivert Burbaka Nielsen, Finnegan, Raja Rajan, and last but not the least, shout out to Sarang Patankar. I'll see you guys in the next video.